Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. After over 11 years of having averted any terrorist attack, United States suffered what seems to be a terrorist attack at Boston at the venue of the famous Boston Marathon. The blasts have brought back all the memories of the September 11, 2001, or 9/11 as it is known, when the country suffered its worst ever attacks. This round of bombings in Boston has once again brought back into focus how the United States continues to be a target of forces inimical to it. As of now, the motive and the people behind this blast remain shrouded in mystery. How will this affect the internal security situation in the United States? How will it have an impact on its foreign policy, if any? More interestingly, how the blasts and its aftermath have been treated by the American public, media, and its politicians. What are the lessons to be learned for India? It has to be mentioned here that a blast has been reported from Bangalore city this afternoon, and already wild speculations are on in our media about various aspects of it. So today we will look at the Boston bombings and relate it to the situation in India and the lessons to be learned from it. To discuss this, I have with me Mr. Salman Haider, former Foreign Secretary, Jayadeva Ranade, former Additional Secretary Raw, and on the phone line from Washington, D.C. is Chidanand Rajghatta, Foreign Editor and US Correspondent of the Times of India. Welcome to all of you. First, let me go to Chidanand. Chidanand, this is after 11 years that there has been complete calm, relative calm, or even we can say complete calm because there was no major incident of such incidents reported. Do you think there was a sense of complacency which had developed in the internal security or the security officials in the United States which has resulted in this?
Not really. If anything, progressively the U.S. was instituting steps. I don't think there was any sense of complacency at all. And when you say that this was, the first incident after 9/11, I would actually qualify it and say this was the first incident that, terrorist incident that succeeded.
Absolutely.
You have to remember that they thwarted several incidents.
Yes.
There was the underwear bomber, the so-called underwear bomber.
Right.
And then there was the Faisal Shahzad episode where he tried to bomb Times Square and very nearly succeeded.
Right.
So they effectively thwarted several attempts, and this was one that got through. And there was always the danger. I think everyone recognized that there is a danger that someday some attempt will succeed. I'm not saying that this was a foreign-inspired attack or a domestic attack. But this is a vulnerable country. It's an open society, as we are in India, and in open societies, it's very hard to prevent, an attack, and particularly a Lone Ranger attack. So I don't think anyone was complacent. It was going to happen someday, and, mercifully it didn't happen for 10 years, and sadly it did. But the fact is, I think this country is on track. And it's a very delicate balance between, continuing to remain sort of an open society and at the same time, put in surveillance cameras everywhere to track people, their finances. It's a tough call. It's a very delicate balance. And this country is finding its way, how best to handle this, as we should, and I guess as we are back in India.
Chidu, any idea why Boston?
Well, it's very hard again. Like you mentioned, fortunately, nobody has leapt to any conclusions, and the president himself has said, "Don't jump to conclusions." And there are basically two aspects. One is that it's a domestic incident, and the other it's a foreign-inspired incident. In either case, you have to remember Boston. The Boston Marathon. There's a background to this. The Boston Marathon is an iconic marathon. It's the oldest marathon in the world. It's been run since 1897.
Right.
And an incredible number of people run in this race. Upwards of nearly 25,000.
This time,
and
over
they come from
26,000.
all over the world, particularly Africa, East Africa. And invariably, the Kenyans and Ethiopians win this race in the men's and women's section. It attracts a lot of attention. So the immediate answer is, of course, that it was a very, very
high-profile event,
a well-known public event, and that there'd be television cameras. And actually, whoever planned this also chose a very appropriate moment in the sense that it was about 4 hours. I believe the clock showed 4 hours and 9 minutes. And that's when a lot of people, and they're basically marathon enthusiasts, they're not professional runners, who usually finish in less than 2.5 hours. And a large group of people come in around 4-hour time, and that's when the blasts were timed. So on the face of it, it seems that this was somebody who knew how iconic marathon was, and how there'd be television cameras and how much publicity they'd get. And the other, of course, so that points to a sort of domestic angle. The flip side is what we learned, the latest is that there were pressure cookers used as bombs.
Yes.
And that is, a sort of a subcontinental signature.
Absolutely.
This is the kind of stuff that happens in India and Pakistan and groups like, Indian Mujahideen, or they use pressure cookers. I've never heard of a pressure cooker being used in any of the U.S. attacks or, U.S. bombings. So that points to a sort of foreign signature, and I think investigators are still, trying to unravel this whole thing. There's a lot of forensic work going on, and you can trust the FBI to be very, very painstaking. This is going to take not weeks, maybe months, maybe years, but they will get him.
Okay. Let me go to Mr. Ranade. Mr. Ranade, there is this interesting thing which Chidanand also spoke about the use of pressure cooker there. And there is already some reports linking to the subcontinent, and this is something which has a signature of India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. What do you think of this?
Well, I'd point to two things here, with specific reference to your question.
Yes.
The first is the technology that the US has used to cover this route and to supplement their security arrangements.
Right.
And it is that technology that helped them not only detect one individual wearing a black backpack and dark shirt who went along the line of the explosions, and he got injured, they picked him up.
Right.
The second is, with the triangulation that they did, they've already raided the place.
Right.
And they, disembarked 2 people who were on a plane. So I would say that, firstly, technology has helped them. They're obviously examining these even more carefully to try and detect who planted these, whether there was more than one person or not. Second, as far as the pressure cookers are concerned, I think Chidu and you are quite right that this is something that is used a lot by the groups that are fighting in the terrorist groups in Kashmir and certain other parts.
Right.
And the ball bearings, etc., that indicates not a high level of explosive being used or difficult, sophisticated explosives, but the way it was put together and the kind of blast that resulted showed a higher degree of skill in putting it together.
Okay. Okay, there are several other aspects which I need to discuss. I'll come back to you, Mr. Ranade. Mr. Haider, there are two things here. One is about, as far as US is concerned, it has been, as Chidu was pointing out, an open society, but still they have to maintain this high level of surveillance and things like that. Second thing is, from the foreign policy point of view, you think this will change anything as far as the way US looks at various issues and the way they were approaching certain issues in West Asia or as far as Afghanistan or Pakistan concerned?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say that this is a terrible event, and our sympathy should be expressed for the victims, and our readiness to cooperate as a people and as a society in whichever way we can to get to the bottom of this and be helpful. I think that of course we take for granted, but it should be reiterated at this point. You had mentioned about the question of what this tells us about US, what's happening in the United States.
Right.
United States, after 9/11, plenty of people are aware of this, has become much more careful. It's an open society, but it's also a society which is vigilant. At airports,
sometimes over-vigilant.
Over-vigilant, maybe, but if you have an incident like this, the security agencies in the USA will say that that vigilance is justified. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Our society is much more vigilant than it used to be, and the indicators are are there for all of us to see. But we are not as technologically, what shall we say, equipped, and our vigilance procedures are not as widespread as they are in the United States,
right.
But they're headed in the same direction. I think the whole world is obliged to be more vigilant, and I think we should be understanding of that,
okay.
and we should, accept the fact that the scope for free access, free ingress, free egress from the country is reduced. So,
as far as the foreign policy of the US
so far as the foreign policy is concerned, when 9/11 took place, there was a demand for retribution.
Right.
And this demand was met. There was a huge sentiment generated in the United States and disseminated from there worldwide, which in fact saw eventually, not before very long, the United States engaged in military activity,
right.
in order to eliminate the sources of the terror that was witnessed in America.
Right.
Today, I don't think till now, I don't know what we can expect, but till now there is no comparable demand.
Or the emotional.
Or the emotional thing. I think it's very, very important to recognize that also. I was just reading on the BBC that the planned parade that took place in Washington was not cancelled. It
went on.
It went on. Furthermore, people were in a way, so determined to show that they were not going to be.
And all things are normal.
Yeah.
Let me get Chidu on this. Chidanand,
yes.
What is the sentiments as of this point of time? And will there be what kind of an effect will it have on the foreign policy? Or do you expect any changes to happen there? Any more hardening of the stance when it comes to various issues, whether it's South Asia or West Asia?
Well, I don't think we should get ahead of ourselves or the answers. Like I said, we still don't know if there's a foreign angle to it. It could very well be a domestic attack. I think I wrote yesterday that everyone is weighing between what's called an Eric Rudolph kind of attack or a Faisal Shahzad kind of attack. And Eric Rudolph was a guy who was an anti-gay, anti-abortion, right-wing extremist, very domestic, who bombed the Atlanta Olympic Park. It could well be something like that, and judging by the way Boston, the marathon was picked, and that would point to something like that. So I don't think we should leap ahead of ourselves and look at foreign policy changes. I don't think that's going to happen. And even if it was a foreign attack, I don't see how it would significantly alter foreign policy. But yes, there'll be greater vigilance and greater scrutiny of people coming into this country, and there already is. You have to remember, tragically, it turns out that one of the three people who have been identified so far was a young Chinese student. She was a graduate student at Boston University from Beijing. So the victims are also, in that sense, it could be foreigners. In an attack like this is and Boston itself, it's a hub of learning, it's a hub of technology, it's a very cosmopolitan city, it's incredibly racially mixed and diverse because of a huge foreign student population. And an event like Marathon, like I said, attracts people from all over the world. The Boston Marathon is run by people from everywhere, including, I believe, there were plenty of Indian participants.
I know.
And there are plenty of Indians and Indian American people in the Boston area. So I don't see it significantly altering any foreign policy issues. But yes, there'll be greater vigilance.
Chidu, another question to you is, you have been, how things happen in India, how people react to this kind of situation in India. Today we have, in both our hometown Bangalore, there has been a blast about a few hours back, an hour back or so. What kind of a difference do you see in the reactions which happen here when some things like that happen, and the reactions which happen in the US, like in the last 48 hours?
Yeah, that's a huge difference. And yeah, well, you know, we we are a work in progress. We have 1.2 billion people, and I shudder because every time there's a terrorist attack, you know, it's almost like a spectacle.
Yes.
And we like to blame, you know, police and law enforcement in India, but I actually, you know, it's our society which is like that. You know, thousands of people mill all over the place. Or, you know, forensic evidence is immediately destroyed or corrupted, and we don't give it you know, chance for law enforcement to get into the action. I'm reminded of the classic case of the Arushi murder in Delhi,
yes.
where, you know, immediately after the murder, they just all forensic evidence was corrupted. And we tend to blame law enforcement, but I think as a society we are fairly callous when it comes to dealing with such issues. And in Boston, it was very striking that you know, not only people did not panic or did not, I mean, they did panic, there was immediate panic, but they tried their best, and the police actually cordoned off, you know, 15 blocks around the area, and they've actually identified the bomb used. The pictures.
And very importantly, Chidu, the role of the media in such situations.
Very restrained, yeah, absolutely, very restrained. And the president himself set the tone by saying, do not jump to conclusions. In fact, in his first statement, he did not even use the word terror or terrorism. And
right.
Only yesterday, after about 24 hours, he said, any act like this is an act of terrorism, regardless of who conducted it. So they've been very vigilant. But again, it's not a perfect society. Again, I don't want to idealize the U.S. It's not perfect. If you remember, I think in the Shehzad incident, he actually slipped out, and from time after he tried to bomb Times Square, he actually managed to get away to the airport and even boarded the plane.
Right,
the plane was pulling out when they actually managed to stop him. So it's not perfect. These are all, both countries, we are work in progress, but we have a long way to go. We have much to learn from these incidents.
Okay, Chidu, we need to go to a short break now, but please stay back. I'll come back to you. We'll continue this discussion. Please keep watching it back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing the Boston bombings and the impact it has and what kind of lessons we can learn in India from that. Mr. Ranade, we were talking about a comparison of how people react to these kind of situations, you know, in what happened in Boston and what happens in India. Now, how do you see this kind of the comparison? How do you see what we do here in India, and what are the lessons that which we can learn from what we have seen in Boston in the last 48 hours?
Well, if we set aside the fact that the credibility of the security authorities at the moment in the public mind is low, there are three lessons that I would draw from what happened in Boston. The first is that there was no finger pointing by the media, though there was a suggestion that internal inquiries are underway to see whether things could have been improved or there could have been better security.
Right.
That is the first.
Right.
The second is that the first responders in the form of the police, the fire brigade, the medical personnel were very quick to arrive at the scene, and the police cordoned off the area extremely quickly to secure the forensics trails that might be available. The third, and in India that doesn't happen, it takes a long time before they come. The third is that the public authorities came to the TV screens, came to national TV and local TV. In fact, I remember the first time they all spoke together, the chief of police, etc., was at about 5:30 in the morning. Right. They came to try and bolster the public image and public morale, but also this was reinforced by very quick action, by picking up one suspect, by getting two others off the plane, by raiding a third house. I mean, they showed that apart from just giving moral assurance to the people, they were also taking quick action. Now, how this pans out, we will have to wait and see. But in India, if you just draw a comparison, you will find that we are lagging behind in a number of areas, particularly in the use of technology in our security establishment.
Okay. Mr. Haider, do you have, when you have seen what is happening there, when you see what happens here, when there's been blasts and things like that, what kind of lessons do we have to learn? Do you think?
But I think
do you think that we are as a society we overreact to situations?
No, let me. I don't fully agree with what has been said about our overreaction and the contrast between America and ourselves. I remember vividly how America was exercised and how its anger spread across the world when 9/11 took place. And with the media, which has been praised here for its restraint at that time, was in the van and taking its lead from the government.
Right.
So situations vary. I think it is important for us to share experiences. It's not so much a question of our learning lessons, except at a technical level.
Right.
That I think is important, that we should see how our police and security, and apart from that, the fire brigade, other services, ambulance services, how they are geared to meeting with this situations of this nature. And my impression is that although we have a long way to go, I mean, it requires massive investment of the type that has not yet been made in India, but we are heading in that direction. We have a National Disaster Management Agency, which is much better equipped than anything we've had earlier. We have quicker responses, and I think that is, as we were discussing a little while ago, that is the direction that we will be taking. We'll have more technology, quicker responses, and I think it's not so much a question of our learning lessons, but of sharing experience.
And is it too early now to, since the kind of, what we discussed earlier, what Chidu also was saying, that it's too early for us to jump to conclusions. But do you see India playing a role in the investigations in this, since there are some hints of some, subcontinental connections?
Well, I really would
how does this happen? At the diplomatic level, you think there'll be something happening at this point of time?
Well, I would be reluctant to give a South Asian sort of stamp to this. But I think we should not forget that police agencies, including ours, security agencies, never forget. If something happens, and why should they? It is their business to investigate.
Right.
We were just told by Chidanand that this was a matter which would be fairly extended. The investigation would go on for a while. It may go on for years. And as several bad cases of this nature have in fact never been closed. And years later, you might find that results can be achieved. So it is important that this cooperation and between us and America and other countries. So this is, after all, a global problem. And the bad people, the terrorists, can hide not in one country alone,
anywhere,
but they can hide anywhere.
Anywhere. Mr. Ranade, do you see any possibility of the cooperation between India and the US and other countries now following this? Are there intelligence lessons to be learned? Are there intelligence things which has to be shared? How do you look at this?
Well, as Ambassador Haider said, this is an ongoing process. And in case the US authorities feel the need is any assistance or any information, usually it will be information assistance that is required. They will certainly contact the people who they feel would be best able to provide it, including us. That's an ongoing process. Secondly, with regard to the equipment that has been used, a lot of these things, are available on the net now, right, in the form of even terrorist handbooks distributed by various organizations.
Right.
So someone who is diligent can pick up all this. So I think it's not, it's not something that anyone would like to discuss openly, but there would be cooperation.
Chidu,
yes.
What do you think will happen now? Is there, as far as the people as far as the American people are concerned, do you see them becoming more, emotional about these things? Because as Mr. Haider was pointing out, there is a vast difference between today's situation and what happened in 2001. when the overreaction took place among the people, the government, the media, everything. You see that seems that there is a significant change in the atmosphere now.
I don't think so. I think a lot has changed since 9/11. But like I said, I don't want to idealize or idolize the media or authorities. It's not a perfect society. There are still a lot of sort of wrinkles. But by and large, I think they're fairly stable. I don't think there'll be any rush to conclusion. And even if a sort of foreign association was proved or tracked down, I think they will handle it in a much more sober way than they did before. The U.S. learned a lot of lessons both from 9/11 and also the Iraq War, when they deluded themselves on the weapons of mass destruction issue. So it's a society that learns fairly quickly. And the second point is, like I said, they are used to investigations taking a long time. Nobody expects things to happen. Remember how long it took to hunt down Osama bin Laden. And actually, even when you look in terms of domestic violence and domestic terrorism, it took years and years to track down the Unabomber.
So, Chidu, so that means that, whether it is the investigating authorities or the government, they have a much more easier, to put easier in quotes, easier way than when compared to the Indian authorities or the Indian government or the Indian establishment when such things happen. The kind of pressure which is put on them by the Indian media or the Indian political establishments, or opposition party, you don't find that happening there, right?
Well, no, it happens here too. I wouldn't say easier. I think the essential difference is in our situation, there's a rush of emotion. We're fairly emotional people, one. And two, we also tend to forget, because so many things happen in India. Our day-to-day, our quotidian life is so full of incidents that we forget. We don't even remember. You guys remember the Jaipur bombing? It's already, and do you remember how many have happened in Bombay? So in Mumbai. So it's just a rush of things in India. Here, I think they tend to plug away at it, quietly, and then when they finally track it, and when they solve a case, there is extensive coverage of a case being tracked. Okay. In fairness, I think in India we don't give enough credit to our authorities. There is, I think Jayadeva said, there is a low level of credibility, unfortunately. But here they keep at it, and I'm reminded the Unabomber was a classic case. It took many years, and when it was finally solved, there was extensive coverage of that. Even in the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing, if you remember, two aspects stand out in that case. One is the initial misidentification. They actually misidentified, and a man named Richard Jewell, who helped find the bomb, was initially persecuted and hounded and was treated as a suspect before they discovered that it wasn't him, and it was a guy named Eric Rudolph, who was a wingnut. So it's a very careful society, and much as Salman Haider is right that post 9/11 there was this incredible outpouring of emotion. But remember, the scale of the incident was also incredible. I think it's much more deliberate and thoughtful process now.
Thank you, Chidu. So we have to end the program here, but it's quite evident that there are lessons to be learned. We are a different kind of society, but still, as Chidu was rightly pointing out, we have to give credit where it is due, and we also need to be patient when such things happen. Thanks to all my guests, Mr. Salman Haider, Mr. Jayadeva Ranade, and Chidanand Rajghatta from Washington. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.